Hello and welcome back to another episode of You Want to Do What with Dan and Julie. Today we have Jake Meyer on, who is a mountaineer. Hi, Jake.
Hello. How are you?
All good. How are you?
I'm not too bad, thank you. It is a Monday evening. I feel like we've broken the start of the week, and it's going to be a good week.
It will be. So do you want to let everyone know a little bit about what you actually do, Jake?
Yes, absolutely. So my day job as such is management consultancy, but I guess I'm probably slightly more well known for mountaineering and adventuring. And so I guess that my career path to date, because of course nobody really knows where our careers will take us, is very much of following a true passion, and for me that's been about mountaineering and adventure and climbing, and then can you manage that and can you balance that with the rigors of a day job and family and all those other fun things that come with life.
So where did this passion for mountaineering and exploring come from?
So it came very much from the sense of being completely useless at sport at school. So,
really?
Yeah, I am completely malcoordinated. I can't catch, kick, or throw a ball to save my life. My children are already better than I am in terms of their hand-eye coordination. But I very much believe that we all have within us an opportunity to be good at something. It's just, can we find it? And hopefully we can be good at many things. And I don't know whether or not you guys share a sort of similar experience from school, but there seems to be quite a strong correlation of those who were good at sport and those who were considered cool.
Definitely.
And whilst, of course, I do appreciate that correlation is not causation, I thought to myself, well, I'm definitely not in the cool gang because I can't play sport. So if I can find a sport that nobody else does, then I will be the best in the school, and by default, I will then become cool. So this led me down this incredible path, or perhaps I should say up this incredible path. And by the end of it, of course, I might have found something that turned rapidly from a hobby into a passion, a way of life. I don't think I came cool at all, other than a very literal sense of the word, and have got quite chilly on some of my expeditions.
So you have some pretty impressive records of your mountaineering. Tell us a little bit about those.
So when I first started climbing, the big challenge that I set myself in the first few years was that of a challenge called the Seven Summits, which is the highest mountain on every continent. And this was the late 90s, so it was still a real novelty back in those days. I mean, it's still pretty uncommon that people do it these days, but it was definitely much fewer people who did it. And at the time, I was 14, and the youngest person in the world to complete it was a British army officer, actually, called Sandeep Dillon. And he was 28 years old, and he'd just become the youngest person in the world to climb the highest point on every continent. And if you can imagine this cocky, naive 14-year-old trying to be cool, of course, think to myself, he's 28, I'm 14, 28, 14, 28, old man. 28 is ancient, isn't it? Completely. Yeah, I know, completely past it. And if he can do all of that, then why can't I? And so despite the fact that I'd never climbed a mountain before, despite the fact I'd never climbed outside of the UK, I decided to set my sights, I guess as the cliche goes, as high as possible. And on this this journey of trying to climb the seven summits of the highest mountain on every continent. And whilst I'm sure we'll probably talk a little bit more in the detail about this, of course, as I then undertook this challenge, along that journey in that route, I found out a lot more about myself. And of course, when I eventually succeeded in it, what I realized was that actually I hadn't conquered my life's ambition at all. All I had done is to pull up on another ladder, another rung on the ladder, and more mysteriously appear out of the ether above me. So, that one of the earlier lessons that I found was, you can set yourself some big, exciting challenges that you think are the ultimate challenges. But amazingly, when you succeed in them, if you're fortunate enough to succeed in them, you realize actually it's just a stepping stone to something bigger and better.
So how old were you when you finished it?
So I was 21 and 134 days old.
Wow.
And is that still the record?
No, it's not. No. Oh, goodness. I am now the old man in comparison, or certainly that record.
Well, hopefully you inspired some people to...
yeah, maybe. I'll let myself down gently with that one. So I did it just after I turned 21 and got to the top of Everest, which was the final of my 7 summits, which was amazing. And it was everything I was expecting it to be. It was a complete myriad of emotions, of elation, of of relief, of exhaustion. It was just fantastic. But as I say, I was 21. I was at university at the time. It then was beaten, I can't remember, a few years later. And I think the current record is 14.
Wow.
Yeah, which is pretty punchy.
Wow. I mean, I can't believe that 14.
That is really young.
What is it actually about mountaineering and exploring that really excites you and makes you go back and back to it?
So I guess the answer to that question is very different now as to what it was back when I first started. So if I try and sort of put myself back in those teenage years about what it was all about, it was a sense of the adventure, of course, of the challenge. But in terms of who I was, I think it was very much a piece of sort of searching for my identity, and this idea of finding a challenge, finding something to do which was different, that not that many people did, that made me sort of uncommon in that sense. And so the idea of sort of dare to be different was absolutely there right from the start. And again, you could sort of, I'm sure my psychotherapist would probably ask me, well, why did you feel like that? And again, I think, I was just a very normal and average kid growing up, pretty middle of the road, never first at much, never last at much. And so to find something which allowed me to create my own identity and something that I would then become known for and known as was quite important to me. And doing the climbing, the adventuring, setting out on this big challenge and something that was so unfamiliar was the route to this destination.
I think there's something in all of us, isn't there, that sort of urge to explore and discover things and travel a bit. But I feel like nowadays there's less and less opportunity to do that, and mountaineering is probably one of the last sort of adventures you can go on.
Yeah, I mean, I think again, I can sort of comment in numerous ways on that. At the moment, there isn't much exploring that many of us can do, or at least, unless we're going for a grand adventure to the attic. But as long as there are no more than 5 other people there. But yes, I quite agree. I think this idea of seeking new experiences, and of course, the reasons for exploring are many and varied. You've got everything from sort of, the original exploration of finding new lands and places to conquer and all sorts of colonial stuff that went on, a long time ago, which I think, many people would like to forget about. But then you've also got that sense of exploration for science, for understanding more about the planet. I was watching the new Attenborough program the other day, which was fascinating. And what was amazing about it was watching the footage of him in the 1950s and 60s going to parts of the world that really no TV camera had ever been to before. And so he was bringing that sense of exploration to people's living rooms. And again, you've got this sense that, current COVID situation aside, that any of us could jump on a plane and be almost anywhere in the world, okay, slight budget, notwithstanding, within 24 hours, whereas, even 60, 70 years ago, you might be talking weeks, if not months, to get to somewhere.
Yeah.
The world has opened up, but then one could also say that's the opportunity for us to explore ourselves inwardly as much as exploring the outside world.
So you've obviously, this isn't not your full-time job. So how do you balance it? Because I can't imagine a quick trip up Everest is the same as a 2-week holiday. What's life like for you to balance your passion with a career?
It's a challenge. It's a bit like sort of spinning a lot of plates at the same time, because of course, it's not just as simple as a nice seesaw with a career on one side and an adventure on the other side. Because of course, you then add in family commitments. I'm an officer in the Army Reserve, so you add that in. So I've got sort of 4 major things sort of vying for my time, my attention, my wallet, etc. And climbing is definitely not necessarily the most expensive of those. For anyone who's got children will understand. But it is tricky. And so I think that again, at the end of the year, so to speak, you have to sort of look back and reflect on what you've done, or perhaps look forward to the next year and think, okay, well, what do I want to do? What do I want to achieve? And again, these are strange times that we live in. So thus far this year, I haven't done a big expedition I was aiming to do, for very obvious reasons. I hope we'll get an opportunity to repeat it or to go and do it next year. But I booked 2 weeks off at the beginning of December, and I don't know where I'll be able to go, but I just want to go somewhere. If that's going overseas, amazing. If it's going up to Scotland and do a bit of some Munro bashing, climbing some hills up there, whatever I'm able to achieve. So it's a constant balancing act.
So mountaineering and exploration as an industry as such, it's hard to describe it as that, but people do work in it full time. How is the industry actually structured? Can you be a full-time mountaineer?
Yeah, you can. So you can look at it on various different levels. You've got those who are sort of the professional adventurers, who, I guess they are the mountaineering influencers, you could say, because they're probably funded through sponsorship, so they're just going on a lot of expeditions. To be fair, there aren't a lot of those in the world.
Is that people sort of like maybe Aldo Kane, people like that?
Yeah, well, it is, but I mean, actually, you look at Aldo, and his main career. I mean, obviously, he's got his military career, but his main career is about facilitating the expeditions.
Right.
So he is I'm trying to think how he describes himself, but he's sort of a remote working specialist. So whether or not you want to, if you're Steve Backshaw and you want to go and film a trip, brilliant. Aldo's a great guy to have there with you, because not only can he do the adventure stuff, but also he's very used to working in hostile environments. But you could have, in theory, you could get like a university group who are going to sort of a weird and wonderful part of the world, who employ him to go along with them to support them. So you can definitely do the remote working, sort of wilderness side of things, and that sort of leads me on to the idea of guiding or professional guides. So either in the UK or internationally, you have various guiding schemes. So some countries, in fact quite a lot of countries, you don't actually need a formal guiding qualification to have people, or to get people to pay you to go into the mountains. But obviously, hopefully, what people who are marketing themselves as guides is that they have the experience, ideally some qualifications, because that generally says that they've passed certain quality assurance, and they have that experience, and they're up to date with their first aid and that and everything they need for it. So you can definitely work full time, or again, it's not exactly easy, especially at the moment, but there are definitely opportunities to work full time as a mountaineering guide, climbing instructor, outdoor education, things like that. Again, whether or not that is working you could be starting off working as a climbing instructor at a local climbing wall and then venturing out from there, to people who spend the vast majority of the year overseas on big expeditions, and they'll bounce from Kilimanjaro to Nepal in the spring, and then Pakistan in the summer, and then they'll do the Antarctic in the winter, and so they're permanently sort of jumping from one adventure to a next adventure, either as owners of guiding companies or as the guides themselves.
So you're in the reserves, obviously, you mentioned earlier. Do you find that a lot of mountaineers or explorers have a military background in some ways?
I don't, I wouldn't know, and I'd be purely hazarding a guess in terms of, what proportion of people who work in the industry have some sort of military background. I mean, I think it's, it wouldn't be, insufficient, or it wouldn't be a small number, but at the same time, there'll be plenty of people who have, gone grassroots upwards, into the sort of the climbing and the adventure world. I could see that the military traditionally was very much a place where that might have started, because of the amount of adventurous training that you would have done in the military, the experience of just being outside and living in those kind of environments, and those skills that you would have therefore had when you left the military. But I think nowadays, actually, it's just as easy, one could say, to get in, straight in, and there are plenty of places such as Brennan in Wales, or up in Scotland at sort of the National Mountain Centre, where you could go almost of zero to hero on a guiding qualification over the course of many months or years potentially.
Having the Seven Peaks completed at 21 was probably quite good on your CV. I was wondering, what are some of the biggest things you've probably pulled from your mountaineering experience that's helped you in industry?
So I think for me, one of the things that's really important is how you work with other people. Contrary to what a lot of people would think, and they probably assume that every expedition I go on, I sort of build my team from ground up and get the best of the best and people I've worked with for years. Actually, a lot of the time I might be climbing alongside or partner with people I don't know that well or haven't climbed with before. So the ability to be metaphorically parachuted into a group of people and to you may be very different in your background, your outlook, but to say, okay, we're here to work together to achieve a collective aim. Let's make the best of it. And I've seen on expeditions and in the commercial and corporate world, many people who, let's just say, don't necessarily fit cleanly or comfortably into working with others. Because a lot of it is about compromise. And it's not saying that, have to reduce yourself to the level of the bare minimum, but, we'll all have certain things that we like. But if we're a part of a team, we have to realize that we're there to support the collective endeavor. And that might mean sort of taking a step back from the things that we personally want to maximize the chances of the team. And so I think that's a really important skill to have. It's not me. Ironically, considering that most glossy photos from mountaineering is about somebody standing on top of a mountain waving a flag. Yeah. Actually, it's the team and it's the group that helps you get there, or that you're part of in that journey.
Have you always wanted to be a full-time mountaineer, or are you very much happy having your career and hobby separate?
So when I first left university, I tried to do it full time. But what I quite quickly realized, or perhaps I went into it in slightly the wrong way, in that it wasn't actually the mountaineering piece that I was trying to do full time, even though I sort of was calling myself a full-time mountaineer. The piece that sort of paid the mortgage or bought the beer at the end of the week was the public speaking, was some media work that went alongside it. More often than not, actually, you didn't get paid at all for the media work. That was a bit of an ego trip, but helped sort of promote yourself and to build your identity within the world, which therefore meant that either it was easier to get sponsorship for the expeditions, or that people would have you go and speak. And the speaking could be very lucrative, getting paid a lot of money for a relatively short amount of time. And certainly at university, thinking to myself, OMG, I can't believe that people are paying me, organizations are paying me to come and talk about my holidays, basically, and my adventures. Okay, slightly different holidays to most people. Now that was pre-financial crisis. So that was pre-2008, or the last big financial crisis. And so I left university 2007. Of course, financial crisis hit 2008, and a lot of the big sort of corporate gigs dried up. And so I spent sort of a few years, doing odds and sods, and doing a lot of speaking at schools. Really enjoyed that. But you do just as many for free as you would that you'd managed to get any budget for, and going on a few expeditions and a few trips. And it wasn't long until I realized, actually, is this really sustainable? I hadn't gone down the route of trying to get climbing qualifications. It's definitely something I could have done, but I think I realized that I didn't want to be a professional guide. I wanted to climb for the things that I was interested in, and not necessarily just end up sort of doing the same trip again and again with different groups. And that was when I sort of had a bit of an epiphany moment of thinking, right, well, can I try and get into a career where I don't completely sell my soul to the corporate world, but I can, continue my military service, but also continue a bit of climbing. And I've been very fortunate to get into a management consultancy career, which traditionally, in terms of management consultancy, would be seen very much as tied to a desk, doing computer system migrations and things like that. But I work in sort of the field of leadership and development, which is fascinating and chimes very closely with what I do sort of outside work. So I'm very fortunate in that.
And somebody listening to this that wants to be a full-time mountaineer or guide, what's the best way to go about getting some of these expeditions funded?
So, well, okay. So I think that there's some two different things. If you want to be the full-time mountaineer and not necessarily the guide, then then you've got to think about the funding really closely. If you want to be a guide, then the opportunity there is much easier to go on amazing trips because ultimately you build up your reputation, and either you get your own client list, or you work for a company that offers basically a mountaineering agency or a travel agency who offers adventures around the world, and they use you to guide expeditions. So you get paid to go and do these amazing things, and I've got a number of friends who do that, and sometimes I look at them quite jealously when they're just about to go and jump on a plane off to somewhere, wherever it is, and I'm thinking, when I do those kind of things, I've had to work really hard to go and get the funding for it. But of course, the grass always seems greener on the other side, because of course, they are working to the client, and somebody that I know quite well at the moment is in the process of a huge lawsuit with a client because of something that went on an expedition. Nobody was hurt or anything like that, thankfully. And ironically, it was because the guide made a very safe decision, but the client wasn't very happy with the decision that was made. So it comes with certain other challenges that come with it. So cycling back to the idea of the doing it more for yourself, so it's not your job. And the sponsorship or the self-funding. I mean, self-funding is the easiest in theory, but often the hardest practically, or maybe it should be the other way around, because ultimately you need your own money. So either your job or whatever you're doing has to be able to, allow you to save up so you can spend your the pennies at the end of the month on an adventure. But if you're looking down the sponsorship side, that in itself could be a multi-hour long conversation. Because, the crux of that question is, why would anyone pay you to go on your own holiday? And sort of sometimes rather flippantly, I refer to the definition of an expedition being a holiday that somebody else pays for. But if you look, if you're cynical, that's what it is.
I think I need to rethink some things.
Yeah, exactly. So I think therefore you've got to think very carefully. If you're trying to get sponsorship, you've got to think really carefully about how you're presenting it to your target audience to get them to come on side. And especially for people who are earlier on in their funding career, I would say keep it as close to home as possible. I'm not necessarily saying that everybody is fortunate that mummy or daddy could pay for it, but sit down and create a list of your network, of your parents' network, of close friends and contacts, and really as close as possible. Certainly, no more than 1 degree of separation. So, a friend of a friend, maybe that's 2 degrees. But people that you could potentially get in touch with, people that would know you. And let's not kid ourselves. They're probably not going to put their hand in their pocket and give you £50,000 to go and climb Everest. But if you could find, 100 people who might be willing to give you 500 quid. I know that in itself sounds just as bonkers as finding one person to give you 50 grand. But, lots of little bits of money of people who just want to support you because you're doing something amazing, then that's really cool. If you're going down the corporate side, then that in itself is a great challenge. You have to take on a much more sort of professional outlook. And actually, when I think back to when I first started doing it, so I cringe at some of the early either letters that I sent out, back in the days when it pretty much was letters and stamps, but also just the relationships that I had. Amazing. I still managed to get a little bit of funding from organisations, but often they did tend to be connections. It was the father of a friend of mine, so it would be wrong of me to say that I haven't used my network, and I know you could argue that it's using my own privilege of that network, but make the most of it. To see what you can get. Yeah. The other thing is grant schemes and award schemes as well. So I was very fortunate actually, and in some ways this probably helped me right from the beginning, when I was 18, I got something called a Winston Churchill Memorial Trust Traveling Fellowship, which is a bit of a mouthful, but essentially they give out about 100 of these a year, and they can be worth anything from sort of $4,000 to 6 or even $8,000, I think, potentially. So it's a large pot of money that's going out to help fund people from the UK who are going overseas to learn something, to do something different. And there is often a category which is maybe connected to adventure, but to be honest, most of the categories are professional categories. So you might have a police officer who's going to New Zealand to study, Kiwi policing techniques, or you might have, a dry stone waller who's going to Lesotho to study wall building in Africa. So it's all sorts of these amazing opportunities, and anyone who's is looking for funding, I would absolutely encourage you to go and have a look at the Winston Churchill Memorial Trust, so WCMT, and they give out loads of these every year. I'm not quite sure actually what's going on at the moment, but I was very fortunate, and that helped fund a number of my early expeditions. But there are plenty, the British Mountaineering Council, the Royal Geographical Society, all sorts of different organisations, which if you just go and have a look at them and look at for their awards, their grants, all sorts. Land Rover do a bursary every year for the Royal Geographical Society, which includes cash and the use of a Land Rover discovery for an adventure. So if you're creative, you've got a good idea, the sky's the limit.
Wow. Okay. That's brilliant for people to get started in there. I'm wondering, you have obviously completed quite a lot by the age of 21. What was it for you after that? Where was your next big goal?
So earlier I spoke about that feeling of getting to the top of Everest and feeling complete. And actually in some ways, whilst it was this incredible myriad of emotions of elation, relief, exhaustion, etc., and joy, actually completeness is probably the wrong phrase. If anything, it's the antipathy of what I actually found on the summit. I don't quite know what I was expecting to find at the top of the world. Some ticker tape parade and tinsel and party poppers, but actually, in some ways, it was a little bit of an anticlimax, because for 7 years of my life, I've been so focused. Most of my teenage years, I've been so focused on building up to the 7 summits and climbing Everest that I hadn't really thought that much about what came after it. At that stage in my life, I was an Army scholar. I was going to join the Army full-time. But suddenly reaching the top of Everest, and even literally whilst coming down from the summit, I was already thinking, what next? What climb do I do next? And I don't know if beforehand I'd sort of been expecting that after Everest I would hang up my crampons and it would be slippers and, writing my memoirs in front of a roaring fire. But I just hadn't put any thought into in terms of sort of the future. But on the way down from Everest, I thought, well, how do I top that? I obviously can't go any higher, but can I go harder and still, something similar to this? And so the fixation for a long period of my life became a mountain called K2, which is the second highest mountain in the world. And in the end, it took 10 years and 3 attempts until I finally got to the top of K2.
That has a really deadly reputation, doesn't it, K2?
It does indeed. I mean, it's known as the Savage Mountain, and I think it was Chris Bonington once referred to it as the gold medal of mountaineering. So that sort of puts it into perspective in terms of the scale and the danger. I mean, certainly the first time I went there, it had statistically speaking, it had a summit to death rate or death to summit rate of, for every 4 people who got to the top, 1 person died.
Jesus.
Which.
Wow.
And again, coming back to this idea of sponsorship and selling yourself is an interesting one. Ironically, in some ways, I think that was part of the attraction to some sponsors, even if it was not something I really brought up that much at home. I like to say, however, for the record, that whilst it was 4 to 1 or 1 to 4 when I first went there, when I went back for the third time, it had changed. It was 1 to 5.
Oh.
Yeah. With are you having such a passion and such a drive for mountaineering? Are you able to take that drive and put it into the other aspects of your life, such as your career and the Army Reserves?
Yes, I am. I'm very fortunate that I'm just a naturally enthusiastic person. When I find something that I'm interested in that I want to do, which one would hope actually most of us would be like, that I will really give it my all and throw myself into it. I think the other thing about climbing that it teaches you is you have to innovate. And when I say innovate, I'm not sort of saying I'm inventing new equipment or anything like that, but you're constantly having to be creative. The route up the mountain is rarely, unless you're on Snowdon, is rarely a nice paved path. So you're having to be creative with your route finding, with how you get somewhere. And I think that's a really important lesson, both in short-term projects, but also in life as well. It's really positive to have a goal, to have a target, to have something that you're aiming for. But at the same time, yes, you need a bit of a plan, but don't risk being so dogged in sticking to that plan that actually you miss the opportunities that come along the way. And you never quite know where that path may lead in order to get to that destination, even if it's a momentary destination that you're aiming for. If I reflect on the fact that sort of I introduced myself today as a management consultant, if you told that to the university version of me, I would have laughed in my beer. Don't be ridiculous. There's absolutely no way I would be ever calling myself anything like that. I had friends who were going to work for Accenture and McKinsey's and OCC and places like that. That was not going to be me. And so, this is the wonderful thing of life is you end up going in all sorts of different directions. And, suddenly you wake up and you go, wow, how did I get here? What an amazing journey.
I think it's a really good point. And it was one of the reasons when we were exchanging emails, I was really excited to get you on because I don't think, 50-year careers are really going to exist for our generation and the generations after. It's about taking and learning skills and being able to adapt and take opportunities, like you say. Absolutely.
It is, very much now is the moment for, sort of Gen Y, it is, I think, what did they say? That it's, that in the first 10 years of your working career, you'll have had 10 different jobs, something ridiculous like that. Whereas if you said that almost to my generation, someone would look at you and go, that obviously just means you're really bad at your job and you keep getting fired. Whereas now for the current generation, who are entering the work stream now, that is a case of sort of jumping, not necessarily from different organizations, but sort of jumping from one role to another and just being very nimble and flexible about what you do. And that I think is exciting because let's face it, the world is changing so quickly that 50-year career, if you set out on that now, that job might not even exist in 3 years, let alone 50 years. So, don't, be very careful about, I'm very conscious there are a lot of current career paths that are potentially threatened by this, but think about the future of a career. And what will this look like in a few years' time? What will this industry look like in a few years' time? If you told someone who went to work for BP or Shell sort of 30 years ago that nowadays, whilst obviously most of their revenue is still drawn from from petroleum, that actually BP would stand for beyond petroleum, not what it did. But it's amazing to see how these different industries are adapting.
And you're part of the Army Reserves, which is amazing already. But is there sort of a link there with the adventure as well? Do you get involved with that side of the army?
I do, although actually, ironically, whilst there are huge opportunities to do lots of what we call adventurous training, AT, within the military, I haven't actually done that much. And I don't know whether or not that's because it's a little bit of a busman's holiday for me, possibly. But it's just about sort of where you focus your time. I reflect on actually a whole load of my soldiers this weekend went sailing for the weekend. They got paid to go sailing,
Wow, nice.
and then this morning they went back to their normal jobs. Granted, for most of them that was probably just going downstairs to their office or to their living room, but they spent the weekend, all in their waterproofs, sailing around Gosport, which is really cool. And the majority, not all of them, of course, because that would be dangerous, but the majority of the people on the boat, on the yacht, had never sailed before. So, the Army Reserve and the Army in general, the military, sorry, I should say, and the Royal Marines Reserve and the Naval Reserve and the RAF reserves, so many great opportunities to try new things. And that's one of the things I really love about it, is, especially for me, who's been in it for a few more years, is seeing new recruits coming in from all sorts of different walks of life. Some people who have a lot, some people who've had nothing, and sort of choosing this as we tend not to call it part-time, but spare time career, where it can be something that they just do a little bit in the background, or they can turn it into a proper secondary career. The other nice thing, especially at the moment with, so many jobs being under threat, is that with the Army Reserve, it's pretty much always guaranteed that, if you were to be made redundant tomorrow, you could probably be working and have money coming in next week with something in the army. And don't worry, I'm not talking about sort of being sent off to some war zone around the world, but there are so many opportunities.
So it sounds like it's a great place for anyone with sort of an adventurous spirit to get involved with. What's the sort of best way to get involved with the reserves?
So if you're looking at the reserves, the best thing to do is just to go. I talk about it very much, obviously, from the Army point of view, but same for the RAF and the Royal Navy. But go to Army, the Army website, so Army Jobs, and just have a look, and just type in Army Reserve and have a look. And what you would do is you could do a bit of research, and certainly for the Army Reserve, because the Army Reserve is local, tends to recruit locally. So wherever you are in the UK, and you can work this out on their website, is you find where your nearest Army Reserve unit are, and they'll probably give you a few that are nearby, and just ring them up and just go and have a visit, and just go and knock on a door of a Army Reserve centre. You probably may find that there's one just down the road from you or in the next door town that you'd sort of never really been aware of, and now you'll never miss it. And just go in and say hello and say, I'm just interested to see what you do. There is never any compulsion. They're not going to press gang you. They're not going to, if you walk in, they're not going to sort of lock you up and send you off to, boot camp or anything like that. And we get loads of people who come along and they just, have a look and come along for an evening or a couple of evenings to see what we do. And then they don't come back. And that's absolutely fine, because, they decide it's not for them, but they've come and they've had a look. And that's what's really important. Fortunately, we get loads of people who decide to stay because they really enjoy it.
Mountaineers like yourself who balance the career and the passion, what would you say are some of the biggest personality traits that help you thrive?
So one of them, I think, the first one is actually the one that you mentioned in that is passion. Be passionate. I think, especially, I mean, not that mental health hasn't been an issue before, but now that it's so much, we're so much more aware of it. Be passionate about things. Feed off your own energy, and that, I think, can be really positive. And I know that we all have challenges and we all have things that don't go the way we would like them to go. But if we can find something, however small it is, and whether or not it's climbing mountains or it's making airfix models, it doesn't matter. But something you really enjoy doing, you get a lot of sense of self-worth out of it. And I think self-worth is really important, again, from a mental health point of view. That you go, I enjoy this, whether or not it's something you do by yourself or you can do with other people. Even if it's something you do by yourself, think about how you can get involved with others, joining a club or a group. So at least you can share your experience or share other people's experiences. So be passionate about things, find things to be passionate about. The next one, I think, is patience as well. And again, I think it'd be very easy for anyone of my generation or older to look at, the younger generation and to go, oh goodness, the youth these days, they've got no patience. They want everything immediately, click, click, click of their fingers. That is, nobody's to blame for that other than technology. We're so used to it. We are all the same. We all expect things quickly. But patience is a virtue. It really is. And if I reflect on big expeditions, sometimes, you might be away for 6, 7, 8 weeks at a time. And of that time, you might spend 50% of that sitting in base camp, not doing anything. And so expecting to be climbing every single day and constantly sort of doing something which is actively helping towards achieving your goal, sometimes you need rest days and you need times to sort of sit back and relax and appreciate that you're playing a longer game.
So what would be some of the biggest positives or opportunities you've had out of the mountaineering side of your career?
For me, a couple of things. Firstly, the opportunity to see the world. I'm very fortunate, and I'm not blind to the fact that in seeing the world, of course, over the years, I have built up a bit of a carbon footprint as well. It's unless you do it all virtually, if you want to physically go and see the world, or you've got a lot of time to bicycle there or go in a canoe, you probably are going to have a carbon footprint. But it is amazing, and it just constantly reminds me what an amazingly diverse world we have. And I'm not just talking sort of from in terms of physical features, but the people, the cultures, and that's one of the things I love about mountaineering is, yes, you're going to climb a hill or a mountain or something, but ultimately a pile of snow and rock in one country is remarkably similar to a pile of snow and rock in another country. What makes it different is often the journey, the cultural journey that you take to get there, and the people that you meet along the way. The other thing which I think is really really important and really key is about making the most of the opportunity and what you bring back with it. It's very easy to be sort of selfish and keep, not selfish, perhaps that's the wrong phrase, but sort of to keep things to yourself. And I'm just, very proud that I'm able to sort of go away and have these amazing experiences that many people won't have, often because they wouldn't want to have them, but many people who would want to have them, might not have. But I can share those with others. And a great example, tomorrow morning, I am doing a talk for a school in Salford who are studying mountains as part of their year 3 syllabus. And it's great just as a Zoom call with them. They get to meet a mountaineer and ask me all sorts of awkward questions about how I go to the loo up a mountain, what do I eat and stuff. And that's awesome. So I think a sense of responsibility for the experience you've had and what you can bring home with it.
And on the flip side of that, what would be some of the less favorable aspects of the industry?
So you've got, again, if you're trying to get sponsorship, you've got to be prepared to have a lot of doors slammed in your face, or at least a lot of emails unopened and not responded to. There is a sense of, no matter how passionate you are, you can't want it more than them. You can't want it more than the other person. So you can't just bang the drum outside somebody's office, go, please give me money, please give me money. You will get rejected, and so you've got to not be disheartened by it. And so if it's one thing that I've learned from that is, do not have all your eggs in one basket. So don't sort of, a little bit like job hunting in a way, if you're unemployed, have multiple feelers out, apply to lots of things at the same time. If you apply for one thing and just focus on that, yes, okay, it shows perseverance and focus, but if then that doesn't come off, you're probably 2 more months down the line and you're still in the same position. Yes, a little bit more experience, but you still haven't got a job. So it's the same with fundraising for expeditions. From the other point, the worst bits of it is sometimes just the physical elements of it. You get tired, you get hungry, you're miserable, the altitude sickness. A lot of the time on expeditions, you are asking yourself, why on earth have I voluntarily chosen to do this? Am I completely mad?
We also like to talk a little bit about what people could expect to earn salary wise. So we did a little bit of research and found some figures, and it really did range massively. Some figures were £120 for an overnight guide somewhere. Yep. And then right up at the other high end with high profile clients, you could look to earn maybe £70,000 a year. So does that sort of sit right with you and your experiences in the industry?
Yes, I think it does. I mean, like many industries, it is incredibly broad. I know of people who, a lot of climbing instructors, a lot of guides are self-employed. I know some people, of course, I'm not going to mention any names, but legitimately, of course, they tell me they've never passed a tax threshold. They've earned so little from doing what they've done, they've never properly paid tax or income tax. But having said that, they are rich beyond belief in terms of the experience they've had, and they've chosen that. And this particular person, who I'm incredibly fond of, and I spent a lot of time with, they would say, that they have had, more experiences than the greatest the greatest millionaire mountaineer could ever have, and that's cool. And actually, if someone's, if you're spending 9 months a year on expeditions, and you're getting paid to do that, and it's not costing you anything, what you make the rest of the time to cover those other 3 or 4 months actually is not too bad. And then at the other end of the spectrum, where you've got either some very high profile adventurers, again, your adventure influencers, perhaps, although possibly we're sort of starting to merge different industries here. They can be, earning hundreds of thousands of pounds a year, potentially. But it can be real feast or famine. And again, if I think of friends who are at the upper end of those spectrums, they can have very good years. But also, you could have a very expensive expedition and something goes wrong on it, and you need to call in a rescue helicopter that costs £20,000. That costs you £20,000. Because you can't get insurance for those kind of things, or whatever it is. So there are all sorts of different angles that come from it. But as I say, I think the important thing in here is don't go into it to get rich, financially speaking. Go into it to get rich from an experiences and an adventure and a life experience point of view.
Absolutely. And what would be something that's not in the job description? But also on top of that, how easy is it for you to balance the passion or the mountaineering with the career? Are you able to just do everything within your holiday period?
Yeah, so no, not really. So I would normally get, sort of 5 weeks holiday a year, of which probably some of that gets used up doing some army stuff as well. And amazingly, my family actually want me to go on holiday with them for some reason. So I do that as well. So no, I'm very fortunate in that in my proper career, I say in inverted commas, in my sort of grown up job, that the company that I work for absolutely see me as an individual and who I am and what I bring to the table, and they know who they employed. And therefore, every couple of years, I want to do a big expedition. They've always been incredibly supportive in giving me the time off, whether or not that's been unpaid leave or potentially even partly paid leave, to have anything up to 2.5 months off, which is amazing. And I know a lot of employers wouldn't be in a position to do that, or it would be difficult. But I think, the two aren't mutually exclusive. I think there are opportunities. Obviously, if you're self-employed, then that's a lot easier. And I've met many people over the years who are, self-employed with a particular, professional skill. So they will be a consultant for 6 months of the year and earn a lot of money doing that, and then spend the other 6 months of the year traveling. Which is really cool. And then going back to your point about what's not in the job description, again, sort of, and I'll probably think of some much better answers to this, or funnier answers after I put down the phone. But I think the main thing is actually spending as almost what feels like as much time in a suit as I do in Gore-Tex. And the reason for that is in aiming to get other people to pay for my expeditions and to sponsor them, or the public speaking. It's not all, again, Instagram, cool pictures on top of mountains. There's a lot of schlepping up and down motorways to go and do talks, or to, finding a way around London to go and meet people to try and persuade them to pay for your holiday. Sorry, invest in an amazing marketing opportunity. And doing that. And as I say, coming back to this idea of getting rebuked and people, pushing back and, doing a lot of stuff for free. And, but again, if you're passionate, then actually that's all part and parcel of it.
Have you got any advice for anyone that wants to progress within the mountaineering industry, and I guess just their career in general, because you would have great experience in people actually doing this? Yeah,
well, I mean, the first things first is I am absolutely delighted for anyone to get in touch with me. Please do, on social media, drop me a line. Delighted to sort of, have a chit chat or to give you any advice I can. I am but one person. And so the first thing, and this is probably, for for any advice in any circumstance, especially around career, is that, I think statisticians say that to get a decent data set, you need at least 20 individual pieces of data. So therefore, be very wary of going to one person asking them advice. Then go to another 19 people and ask their advice. But from my point of view, I would say you be aware of the cost of getting into it, but of course also don't get seduced by the social media aspect of it. You see amazing, cool people doing awesome things all around the world. You do not have to go to the other side of the world to have an amazing experience. And a friend of mine, Al Humphreys, wrote an amazing book called Micro Ventures. And the principle of that was, he'd done big adventures all around the world. And then he decided, actually, I don't even know what's 3 miles from me at home. So he spent a year just doing mini trips.
Wow.
Around the UK. He walked around the M25 in winter.
Oh, wow.
Which is bonkers, but amazing and cool.
Yeah.
And so, sometimes start small. Just have an adventure locally. If you happen to live in somewhere in the UK or in whatever country you're listening from, where you are near cliffs or mountains or things that you can go and climb on, and obviously making sure you do it safely, then lucky you. If you're a little bit further afield, then be creative with what you do, when you do it, and how you do it. As I say, I have no idea what my little adventure is going to be at the back end of this year. It's probably going to be a micro adventure in the UK, and I'm fine with that.
And would you go into the industry and do it all again if you could?
Yes, I would, absolutely. From the point of view of the passion, of course, I absolutely love it. Would I do a few things slightly differently? I think any of us would reflect on choices we've made, things we've done, mistakes we've made, and gone, oh, I wish I hadn't made that boo-boo. But also, that is part of the rich tapestry of experience that has made us the people that, stand or sit here today, isn't it? And so, frankly, if I went back to the beginning, I've had an amazing ride. I've got some scars from along the way, but, I certainly do not feel that the ride is finished. And if anything, we're just getting ready to take it to the next level.
Well, thank you so much for coming on, Jake. It's been an absolute pleasure to chat with you.
Guys, thank you. And, thank you for everything you're doing for inspiring people. And for anyone listening, whether or not you're interested in mountaineering and adventure or not at all, you can't think of anything worse, wherever you end up going, I wish you all the very best of luck and a safe adventure.
Well, thank you so much. And where can people find you on social media?
So on Instagram, I'm at Jake_Climber, on Twitter at Jake Climber, and you can find my website my website, www.jakemeyer.co.uk, and that's Meyer, Meyer. I'm sure if you Google Jake and Everest, it'll probably have my ugly mug there.
Well, thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you.
Thanks, Jake.